It's by the way, I get very nervous on talk shows. I get very uncomfortable, and I produced it because I saw an early workshop of it, and
She is Hollywood's untouchable goddess, fierce, fearless, unforgettable. A woman whose very name commands attention. Angelina Jolie. To millions, she is strength personified, the action star who redefined power, the humanitarian who gave her life to saving others, the beauty who conquered Hollywood and captured hearts across the globe. But behind the fire, there is a wound carved in childhood, deepened in love, and reopened with every loss. She has the world at her feet, yet often feels like she walks alone. She has 6 children who adore her, yet still wrestles with the emptiness of a fractured family. She has built a legacy that will outlive her, yet carries a body marked by scars of illness and sacrifice. The duality is haunting. How can someone with everything, beauty, fame, family, love, purpose, still live with such piercing solitude and heartbreak? This is the tragedy of Angelina Jolie, the warrior, the mother, the star, and the woman who gave the world her strength while quietly surrendering her own. Cue title card: Angelina Jolie, the warrior's heartbreak. Early life and childhood. Angelina Jolie was born Angelina Jolie Voigt on June 4, 1975, in Los Angeles, California, a city built on dreams and illusions. From the very beginning, her life was destined to be extraordinary and heartbreaking. Her father was Jon Voight, a celebrated actor who had already earned an Academy Award and critical acclaim. Her mother, Marceline Bertrand, was an aspiring actress whose own Hollywood dreams dimmed when she devoted her life to her children. From the outside, it seemed Angelina had been born into privilege, into a family already written into the history of film. But the picture-perfect image collapsed almost immediately. When Angelina was barely a year old, her parents separated. Her father's absence would cast a shadow across her entire life. Marceline was left to raise Angelina and her brother, James Haven, largely on her own. Though she gave them unconditional love, the absence of a father figure and the betrayal of abandonment carved deep wounds into Angelina's heart. As a child, Angelina often retreated into fantasy. She would spend hours imagining other worlds, other lives, perhaps seeking an escape from the instability of her own. But even in these early years, the loneliness was evident. Teachers described her as shy, withdrawn, yet intensely imaginative, a girl who seemed to carry an invisible burden. Money was scarce. Marceline worked tirelessly to provide, moving her small family into a modest apartment. There were times when the glamour of Hollywood seemed a million miles away, even though they lived in its very heart. Angelina watched her mother sacrifice her own dreams and silently vowed never to let the world silence hers. By her teenage years, pain had begun to harden into rebellion. Enrolled at Beverly Hills High School, Angelina stood apart from her privileged classmates. She was mocked for being thin, for wearing second-hand clothes, for not fitting the mold of Hollywood perfection. The cruelty of her peers deepened her isolation. She turned to black clothing, knives, tattoos, symbols of both her pain and her refusal to conform.
But beneath the defiance was a girl desperately searching for belonging, for a place where her wounds could be understood. Acting became that place. She enrolled at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute at the age of 11, immersing herself in the craft. It wasn't just performance, it was survival. On stage, she could channel her heartbreak into something meaningful. Yet the tragedy of her early life was already etched into her identity. She grew up craving the love of a father who was rarely there, carrying the burden of a mother's sacrifice and battling the demons of isolation and rejection. These wounds would shape her artistry and haunt her personal life for decades to come. The screen fades to young Angelina staring into the camera, her eyes piercing, almost sorrowful, a face already marked by tragedy, yet destined for legend.
Breakthrough into acting. For Angelina Jolie, acting was never just a career, it was an exorcism, a way to bleed her pain into the light, to transform her wounds into art. But the path to Hollywood's heights was littered with rejection, self-doubt, and the ghosts of her fractured past. Her earliest years in the industry were not glamorous. She appeared in music videos, modeling gigs, and low-budget films that barely hinted at the force she would become. Casting directors often dismissed her. Too unusual, too intense, too much. But what others saw as flaws, Angelina turned into weapons. Her strangeness became allure. Her intensity became truth. By the mid-1990s, the industry began to notice. In Hackers, 1995, a cult cyber thriller, her presence electrified the screen. She wasn't the typical Hollywood ingenue. She was dangerous, magnetic, unforgettable. Audiences didn't just watch her, they were pulled into her orbit. Yet behind the breakout role, Angelina was still waging private wars, struggling with depression, experimenting with self-harm, and living on the edge of destruction. Her performances became a reflection of her turmoil. In Gia, 1998, she delivered a searing portrayal of supermodel Gia Karanji, whose life was consumed by addiction and loneliness. The role was hauntingly close to her own reality. Critics hailed it as genius, but for Angelina, it was more than acting. It was confession. She was baring her soul, exposing the chaos she lived with daily. The Emmy she won for Gia was not just an award, it was validation that her pain had purpose. Then came Girl, Interrupted, 1999. As Lisa Rowe, the charismatic psychopath in a psychiatric hospital, Angelina unleashed a performance so raw it shook audiences to their core. She stole the film from its star, Winona Ryder, and in doing so cemented her reputation as one of the most fearless actresses of her generation. The Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress followed, but the triumph was bittersweet. While the world celebrated her genius, Angelina's private life remained a storm of broken relationships, sleepless nights, and self-destructive impulses. This was the paradox of her breakthrough. Every success carried with it an echo of tragedy. Acting gave her power, recognition, and a place in history. But it also forced her to keep digging into the darkest corners of her soul, corners that were already bleeding. The screen lingers on her Oscar speech, Angelina smiling, radiant, but with a glimmer of something else in her eyes. Not joy, not relief, something closer to exhaustion or sorrow.
Tomb Raider stardom, and the struggle with fame. In 2001, Angelina Jolie stepped into a role that would forever change her life, Lara Croft, the fearless adventurer of Tomb Raider. Overnight, she went from critically acclaimed actress to international action icon. Young girls idolized her. Studios saw her as Hollywood's new golden weapon. And the world couldn't take its eyes off her. But the triumph came at a cost. Fame on this scale is a double-edged sword. The same role that catapulted her to superstardom also cemented an image she could never fully escape: the untouchable warrior goddess. On screen, she was indestructible. Off-screen, she was fragile, human, and vulnerable. The media frenzy was relentless. Paparazzi stalked every move, magnifying her eccentricities into scandals. Her tattoos, her unconventional romances, her admission of having struggled with self-harm all became tabloid fodder. The very qualities that made her authentic were twisted into headlines meant to sell newspapers. Even the role itself carried tragic irony. As Lara Croft, Angelina portrayed a woman who had everything: wealth, beauty, power, control over her destiny. But in her private life, Angelina was quietly spiraling. Fame magnified her loneliness, the chaos of her early relationships, the distance from her father, and her own struggles with depression made the pedestal she'd been placed on feel like a prison. Still, she poured herself into her work. The physical demands of Tomb Raider were brutal. Months of stunt training, grueling shoots in remote locations, injuries she pushed through with stubborn determination. She became the character, almost to her own detriment. Critics argued that she was Lara Croft in real life, bold, rebellious, untouchable. But Angelina knew the truth. Behind the cameras, she was exhausted, often hollow, still carrying the same wounds she had since childhood. Her stardom also brought her into contact with a new world, humanitarian crises. During the filming of Tomb Raider in Cambodia, Angelina witnessed the scars of war and poverty firsthand. What began as curiosity became a calling. She returned, not as a movie star, but as a witness to suffering. It was the start of her lifelong humanitarian work. And yet another paradox: she was saving the world while quietly struggling to save herself. The screen cuts between red carpet flashes and footage of Angelina walking barefoot through Cambodian villages. The contrast is jarring: the goddess of Hollywood and the wounded woman searching for meaning. The Brad Pitt love story and heartbreak. In 2005, Angelina Jolie's life changed forever. On the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, sparks flew between her and Brad Pitt, then one of the world's most admired actors. Their on-screen chemistry ignited into a real-life romance that captivated the globe. They were beautiful, powerful, unstoppable, the perfect Hollywood couple. Brangelina was born. For Angelina, this was more than love. It was salvation. After years of failed marriages, tabloid scandals, and inner turmoil, she had found a partner who seemed to understand her intensity, her restlessness, her wounds. Together, they built a family, adopting children from around the world, later welcoming biological ones. The image was enchanting. The warrior woman transformed into a devoted mother. The rebel transformed into a partner in the world's most glamorous union. But behind the smiles, shadows gathered. Fame magnified every kiss, every argument, every glance. Their relationship was dissected under microscopes, with tabloids chronicling their every move. For Angelina, who had always valued privacy, this constant intrusion was suffocating. The woman who once walked alone was now unable to breathe without the world watching. And the relationship itself was not without strain. Angelina's past trauma and health struggles weighed heavily on her. Brad's own demons added fire to the storm. The larger the family grew, the more complicated their private life became. Behind closed doors, love often collided with anger, tenderness with volatility. By 2016, the fairy tale unraveled. The divorce shocked the world. After more than a decade together, the most powerful couple in Hollywood was no more. Angelina cited irreconcilable differences, and whispers of conflict and heartbreak dominated headlines. The woman who once seemed to have it all was now cast, once again, as tragic. The mother struggling to hold her family together. The partner left fractured by the collapse of love. The custody battles, the public speculation, the endless scrutiny, all of it cut deep. Angelina, who had always sought to protect her children from the world's cruelty, now found them dragged into its harshest spotlight. The heartbreak was not just hers, but theirs. On screen, images flash. Angelina in court filings, paparazzi photos of her holding her children close, her face composed yet tired, her eyes carrying a storm she refused to let the world see. Humanitarian work and the weight of the world. For Angelina Jolie, fame was never enough. The applause, the awards, the headlines, they could not silence the ache inside her. But in the early 2000s, a new chapter began. A trip to Cambodia during the filming of Tomb Raider changed everything. She saw poverty, devastation, and the scars of war, and she knew she could not look away. Angelina threw herself into humanitarian work with the same ferocity she once poured into her roles. She visited war zones, refugee camps, and disaster-stricken villages. She became a UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador in 2001, later a special envoy, meeting with world leaders and pleading for compassion. For millions, she was no longer just a movie star. She was hope. But behind the noble mission was a heavier truth. Angelina was taking the weight of the world onto her already fragile shoulders. Every camp she visited, every child she met, every story of war and loss, she carried them home with her. For someone already battling loneliness and inner wounds, the endless exposure to human suffering deepened her sorrow. Her humanitarian work also came with sacrifice. Angelina was often away from her children, torn between her role as a mother and her duty as an advocate. The tabloids that once mocked her personal life now turned her activism into headlines, some praising, others sneering, questioning her motives. Even in her noblest pursuit, she could not escape scrutiny. And then there was the personal toll. Angelina spoke openly about how the suffering she witnessed mirrored her own battles with depression, self-harm, and emptiness. In trying to save the world, she was constantly reminded of the brokenness within herself. The images of starving children, the endless lines of refugees, the silence of mass graves, these became part of her, etched into her soul. Yet, she persisted. Because in helping others, she found fleeting moments of peace. The tragedy was that even as she gave the world her compassion, she rarely gave herself the same. She carried the grief of strangers like a badge of honor, but it only deepened her exhaustion. On screen, footage of Angelina speaking to the UN, her voice steady, her eyes resolute, Then, a sudden cut, a private moment. Her face blank, her shoulders slumped as the cameras turn away. Health battles and the fear of loss. Fame can mask the truth, but it cannot shield the body from its vulnerabilities. In 2013, Angelina Jolie revealed a deeply personal decision that stunned the world. She had undergone a preventive double mastectomy. Genetic testing had revealed that she carried the BRCA1 gene, a mutation that placed her at an extremely high risk of breast and ovarian cancer. For Angelina, whose mother, Marceline Bertrand, had battled cancer for years before passing away, the fear of history repeating itself was unbearable. This was more than a medical choice. It was a confrontation with mortality, a reckoning with loss. Angelina openly shared her fears of leaving her children motherless, of her life being cut short by a disease that had claimed her mother too soon. Every surgical scar became a reminder of fragility. Every sleepless night, a meditation on what it means to survive while being human. The decision sparked global conversations about women's health and preventative medicine. Yet for Angelina, the publicity came with unexpected pressure. Headlines celebrated her bravery, but the private reality was heavier. Recovery was painful, both physically and emotionally. There were moments of self-doubt, fear, and loneliness. Even surrounded by loved ones, the weight of the choice rested entirely on her shoulders. And then came the second battle, ovarian cancer. In the following years, she underwent another preventive surgery to minimize risk. Angelina's openness about these procedures was revolutionary, but it came at a cost. The intimate details of her body became public fodder. The world applauded her courage, yet the cameras could never see the silent tears, the moments when she feared life might slip away. Her children became both her anchor and her agony. Angelina constantly worried that her absence would leave an unfillable void. Every hug, every bedtime story became precious and terrifying in equal measure. The fear of loss, losing herself, losing her mother, losing her children, was a constant shadow.
Romantic turmoil and motherhood struggles. Love for Angelina has always been both sanctuary and battlefield. Her public romances read like fairy tales, passionate, scandalous, headline-grabbing. Yet the reality was often heartbreak, cloaked in luxury. In her early years, she gravitated toward partners who reflected her intensity. Actors, musicians, and artists whose lives were equally turbulent. Relationships with well-known personalities in the 1990s were fleeting yet formative, teaching her lessons about love, trust, and vulnerability. As Jolie herself would reflect, some relationships burn brightly and then vanish, leaving only ashes and memories. The most defining chapter came with her relationship with Brad Pitt. Dubbed Brangelina by the media, their love seemed untouchable, a storybook pairing of two Hollywood icons. But the pressure of fame, paparazzi scrutiny, public expectations, and personal differences slowly gnawed at the foundation of their partnership. Jolie, a fiercely independent woman who had long carried the weight of personal loss, struggled to reconcile her identity with the demands of the public eye. Their marriage, once celebrated, eventually crumbled under the strain of diverging paths, personal challenges, and deep-seated emotional scars. Motherhood added another layer of both joy and heartbreak. Angelina had long desired children,
driven by a vision of family and legacy shaped by the painful loss of her own mother. She adopted several children internationally, each bringing immense love and complex emotional responsibilities. Balancing the role of a devoted mother with the pressures of career and global activism created an intense internal tension. She often traveled to war zones and humanitarian crises while trying to maintain stability for her children, a paradox of presence and absence. The aftermath of her divorce left her navigating single parenthood under the glare of public scrutiny. Every decision, custody battles, schooling, health matters became a spectacle. The strain on her mental health was profound. Anxiety, exhaustion, and the sense of isolation marked a period where Angelina's personal life felt constantly under siege, even as she projected strength outwardly.
Philanthropy and humanitarian work. Angelina Jolie's life has always been a story of contrasts. Hollywood glamour juxtaposed against some of the world's most harrowing realities. Behind the red carpets and the flashbulbs lies a heart that beats for those who cannot speak for themselves. From an early age, Jolie recognized the fragility of human life. Her own childhood had been marked by instability and loss, shaping a profound empathy that would later guide her humanitarian endeavors. She turned personal pain into action, channeling her energy into global advocacy and rescue missions. Her involvement with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, began in the early 2000s, eventually earning her the title of UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador and later Special Envoy. Her journeys to war-torn regions, from Sudan to Cambodia, Iraq to Haiti, exposed her to unimaginable suffering. She bore witness to famine, displacement, and systemic violence, often at the risk of her own safety. These trips were not photo opportunities or PR exercises. They were deeply personal missions that often left her emotionally drained. She would return to the U.S., exhausted, carrying stories of trauma that would weigh on her for days. Yet she continued, propelled by a commitment to make a tangible difference in the lives of those who had no voice. Jolie's philanthropic work extended beyond advocacy. She founded the Maddox Jolie Pitt Foundation in Cambodia, named after her adopted son, aiming to protect local ecosystems and improve community livelihoods. She supported global education initiatives, medical aid programs, and women's rights campaigns, often personally funding projects out of her own pocket. Her humanitarian efforts were relentless, encompassing both immediate relief and long-term systemic change.
Legacy, recognition, and recent activities. Angelina Jolie's journey is one that transcends Hollywood. While audiences worldwide know her as the fearless Lara Croft or the magnetic Maleficent, her true legacy is etched in the lives she has touched beyond the screen. Her story is one of unrelenting pursuit, the pursuit of art, of justice, of humanity itself. Over decades, Jolie has received recognition not only for her cinematic brilliance, but also for her tireless humanitarian work. She has been honored with numerous awards, including the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award and the Freedom Award, symbolizing her impact far beyond entertainment. Yet, even accolades carry a bittersweet edge. For Jolie, recognition is rarely personal triumph. It is a reminder of the countless stories of suffering she has encountered along the way, a haunting echo of the human cost behind the causes she champions. In recent years, her activities have continued to blend advocacy with artistry. In 2024-25, she has been actively engaged in global crises, from wildfire relief in Tasmania to aid for displaced populations in Ukraine. She has supported groundbreaking projects highlighting climate change, refugee rights, and women's empowerment, often using her platform to amplify voices otherwise unheard. Her efforts demonstrate an unwavering commitment to turning influence into tangible change, despite the emotional toll it exacts. Her cinematic work remains vibrant as well. Jolie collaborates with renowned directors like Martin Scorsese, while also producing documentaries that shed light on human rights abuses, environmental crises, and the refugee experience. Even at the pinnacle of fame, she has embraced roles and projects that challenge her creatively and emotionally, proving that her passion for storytelling is inseparable from her dedication to justice.